Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for being here. My name is Akiva Naiman. I'm a rabbi currently living in Beit Shemesh, Israel. However, I lived for 8 years with my wife and children in the Bay Area. I grew up earlier in my life in Baltimore, Maryland. And so I've really been on both sides of the ocean. It's a great privilege to be here today. Thank you so much for inviting me to speak about these two films. The Pianist from Ramallah and 200 Meters. I'm not sure if you've watched one or both of those films. I thought they were great. I really enjoyed just watching them in preparation for this speech. Great acting, gripping story. I'm not here to do a movie review and get that from somebody else, but I really enjoyed them. Just a little bit more about my background and why I'm speaking here today. So like I said, I grew up in Maryland until I was about 10 years old. And then I moved to Israel and lived there till for about 15 years before moving to the Bay for 8 years, like I had mentioned. And I lived in Israel from 1996 to 2011. And that was, as I'm sure many of you might know, that was during the time of the Second Intifada, that when the years 2000 and 2001, which is really when this partition wall began. That is mentioned a lot in the movies. And so it actually had a lot of emotion for me to watch these videos and to speak about what I'm going to speak about today. When I was in the Bay Area, I ran a youth organization for teens, middle schoolers, and high schoolers called NCSY. And thank God, we've got 1,000+ students here in the Bay Area. And so I've taught on topics ranging anywhere from Shabbat to holidays, and lots of Israel conversation as well. And so this topic, excuse me one second, this topic is definitely not new to me, and something that comes up a lot, and I think is really, really important to discuss, as opposed to just watching the video and brushing it under the rug, or watching a video and moving along, or watching a video and just swallowing what happened there in the movie. I think it's great that we can discuss this. I hope after you're done watching this, you'll turn to the person to your left, you'll turn to the person to your right, you'll and really discuss, what did you just watch? What are your thoughts about it? What do you know about it, right? It could be that you're watching this movie and some of the concepts and some of the topics in this video are the first time you're hearing about it. Or it could be you spent hours poring over different articles and explanatory videos on YouTube to learn about it. Or it could be, as is often the case with many of us, myself included, we just know the headlines. And when we just know the headlines of things, oftentimes, most of the time, we miss the nuance, right? Imagine, if you will, for a moment, if your life was just headlines and someone just read the headlines, they would miss out on the beauty of all the tiny little moments that make your life so special. You'd miss out on the complexities of when you made major decisions in your life. I'm thinking about my life, right? A little bit you know already about my life. If my life was headlines, it would be, boy moves to Israel at 10 years old, but moves back to America at 25. I mean, you just missed everything, right? You missed about the struggles I had acclimating to Israeli culture, the change I had as an 11th grader, deciding to become a strong Zionistic Jew, the difficult decision I made in 2005 when I enlisted into the IDF about whether I should be a medic or whether I should be someone in the artillery. All of these nuances, all of these complexities and intricacies in the story gives us a much better understanding about the context. And this is no different in the movies that we're watching over here. And it is these that I'd like to dive into with you today. And just again, before I get started, don't take my word for it. Google, look online, watch videos, check out what's out there. I mean, there's so much that's been written on this topic. A great channel that I love is called Education Unpacked. It's a project of Open Door Media. And the reason I love their approach to things, both Jewish and Israel, is because they don't shy away from the difficult topics. And they're masterful at weaving the nuances within the bigger picture. And they're short videos. They have longer videos too, but they're short. And I don't know, that works for me. Okay, like I said, I live in Beit Shemesh in Israel. And next door to me, we're talking about, 5 feet away from me, they're in the middle of building, they're doing construction. And when they started, this is back in October, a few months ago, I immediately walked over to the workers there, who are of course all Arabic, and I introduced myself. Marhaba, kif halak, hi, how are you? Can I get you something to eat? Can I get you something to drink? and I can't say we became fast friends, but now I say hi to them when I walk by. They say hi to me. I get them things that they need. Sometimes they need help with different types of things. But I want to say that unfortunately that can very much be the exception to the case. In a lot of ways, there is a big divide between the Israeli culture and Arabic Israeli people and Arabic people. Depending on where you live, there are some cities that are very integrated between the two. There are some cities or villages that are intentionally integrated between the two. I run a summer trip to Israel for Bay Area teens, and one of the organizations I take them to speak at, I take them to listen to, is an organization called Shorashim, which is an Arab and a Jew who've gotten together to promote peace. A wonderful message and organization. But there is a pretty large divide in a lot of ways, and fear on both sides of the other. This wasn't always the case, although there was always the case of tension for sure. But in the year about 2000, and this is what I was speaking when I started preparing the speech, I really went over to the construction site to talk to them about it. In the year 2000, when the Second Intifada happened, there, for those who aren't familiar, you can Google it. There was an enormous amount of terrorist attacks happening every single day. I mean, sometimes, I don't know about exact numbers, but an enormous amount every single day that happened for years. And I remember as a kid growing up, I was 13 years old, and I lived in Efrat at the time. And a friend of mine, who I had just been at his birthday party, a few months prior, had gone out during the day. This is one of the first attacks. His name was Kobe Mendel. There's an organization named after him now. He had gone out during the day to collect wood. I was preparing for Lag BaOmer, for the bonfire, a Jewish holiday, and he was unfortunately murdered by beaten to death, actually, by some Arabic teenagers, by terrorists. And these types of attacks really happened every single day. There were a lot of bus bombings. There were a lot of shootings. I don't remember if there are car rammings. I think that started later in 2015. But there were just a lot of different types of attacks. There were a lot of stone throwings, both there. And when we're talking about stone throwings, I just want to clarify what it means. I mean, really, you should never be throwing a stone of any size. But some of the stones that we're talking, I can't do it with two hands, but there we go. We're talking sizable rocks that when you're throwing them from, 50 feet, 100 feet, and you're throwing them off of a mountain cliff onto the road below, they cause serious damage to your car, God forbid, to the people in the car, especially if there are children in the car. Your car could swerve. Both of my parents have had stones thrown at their car. My mom, as an example, again, just 2000, 2001, really everyone has a story, but was on her way to Sbarro, to the pizza store, right before it was right before it was attacked. It was, unfortunately, a terrible terrorist attack that happened there. It was a very tough time to live in Israel. And it was, I can't say brand new. It's been a country in conflict for untold millennia, but it is certainly following a time of relative peace. And for about 2 years, Israel tried to have different approaches towards peace, diplomacy, different types of military tactics, both politics on the local and on international stage. Things weren't working, and there were, unfortunately, I don't know exact numbers again right now, but thousands of people being injured, with hundreds of people being killed. Please don't quote me on the exact numbers. You can Google the exact numbers on your own. I remember thinking as a teen, we would talk like, well, once 10 people are killed, then they're for sure going to go in and invade. Oh, once it's 50, then for sure. Oh, once it's 100, then for sure. And the numbers just kept piling up. And so eventually, one of the decisions that was made was to create more from a defensive perspective. Again, this is the IDF, the Israel Defense Forces. I haven't fact checked this, but I don't know if there's another army in the world that says we are here to defend. Not everyone says that, but I'm saying that they're literally in the name. We're defensive people. We're here for peace. We're not here to offend. We're not here to be offensive. We're here to defend. We're here to defend our rights and our borders as a country that wants to live in peace with anyone and everyone that is willing to, which we've seen over the last 1 or 2 years. Israel has made peace with multiple different Arab countries in the larger Middle Eastern area. So there was a decision to build a fence. Now, I believe about 90% of this partition is fence. They don't, unless I'm mistaken, in the video they show really only the concrete parts, but a large amount of it is fences. And that stopped I believe over 80% of the terror attacks. It made a huge dent in the amount of the ability for terrorists to be able to come over. Now we're talking about a population of millions here. Obviously, a population of millions, not every single person is a terrorist, or not even every person who might dislike Israel or Israelis or Jews is going to commit a terror attack. But it was able to so what I'm looking for was able to quell a large amount of terror attacks. In addition to other defensive maneuvers and strategies that the IDF took, it was able to quell a large amount of terror attacks. And again, having lived through this, there was a period of, not exactly overnight, but once they started building and finishing that and putting up more of those borders, they were able to we were able to live securely. It was a very scary time. I mean, you got in the bus, you didn't know if you were going to make it to the end of the bus. Right? And I've lived, unfortunately, through many terror attacks. I've had, unfortunately, like I said, I've had friends and students killed in terror attacks. And so when you live in Israel, there's a lot of things that are really important to you. If it's going to be your health, it's going to be your job, it's going to be your neighbors, like everyone. And the added factor of living in Israel is your borders, your security, your day-to-day being able to live and breathe and not be afraid to go down the road on a bus is crucial. It's crucial to be able to live that way. Now, after this partition was built, it made things very complicated for a lot of different people. And again, when I went next door to talk about this, like you're hearing in the story, it wasn't always like this. It used to be you'd be able to drive back and forth. Gaza area, again, I grew up way before 2005 when it was just open roads before the 2005 eviction of all the Jews out of Gaza. Out of Gush Katif area of Gaza. It used to be very open roads. You know, if you were Arabic, Palestinian really wasn't a term back then, but if you're Arabic and living in that area, you could drive in, could drive out. It was really not much of an issue. There was a lot of peace in terms of the people on the ground. And then they had to create these checkpoints. Now, originally, the checkpoints were not very well run. They weren't. I think everyone will agree to that. It was kind of like drive before COVID. If you were trying to drive from Walnut Creek to the middle of San Francisco at 7:45 in the morning, it was just a terrible, it just doesn't work well. It's you go into the car, it's going to take you 2 hours. It's just, at least, right? It's just, there's traffic, there's backups. The system is slow. It's not a smooth moving system. And that was very much how the checkpoints originally worked. It was slow. It was paperwork. Oftentimes the paper wasn't digitalized. A lot of the paperwork, certainly back then, like you saw a little bit in the movie, like the papers were wrong and the woman behind the desk, like, well, you got to go back, nothing we can do. And then that really affected people's lives. It wasn't run very well, which happens. Try to get from Walnut Creek to San Francisco at 7:45 in the morning 3 years ago. It happens. It's part of life. Is it great? It's not great. Can we do better? We can do better. But it's also a normal part of transportation on planet Earth. And that is something you're seeing really in that video, in the movie. It is no longer the case in I don't have the exact number, but in a good amount of the checkpoints, and I verified this with my neighbors in the construction site. It's no longer the case. A lot of things are digitalized, biometric types of identification, and they move very, very quickly, because we're talking about tens of thousands of people who are going into work every single day, and it moves very, very quickly, and it's a very smooth process. Another change that they've told me, I was also talking to the foreman there, who's a Jewish guy, and he was telling me a lot of the information, is that the people who man these stations nowadays are anshe keva. How do you say that in English? Not veterans, but people who are more experienced in the army. We're not talking about, because remember, in Israel, army service is pretty much mandatory. So you're there between 18 and 21, and you're an inexperienced 21-year-old. But now they have people who are officers manning these stations, because complex situations do come up, and you have, your 25, 30, 35 army officer who are manning these stations, or reserve, someone who is more along in life, has more experience, maybe more compassion, someone who understands the complexities of the situation. Another thing I was given to understand is that you can't really secure a border so tight that it is what is the word I'm looking for? Hermeneutically, what's the word I'm looking for? But that is so airtight. Forget about fair or not fair. I mean, we're talking about security and people's lives here on both sides, but it won't work. And there are intentional holes left in these fences that the IDF does know about, that there are border control that knows about this, because that's just how it is. And there are ways to go through. There is smuggling that's happening. But if you wanted to, this is what I'm getting to understand, if you wanted to get a permit, you can get a permit, right? It's kind of like, I'm trying to think of something in America that's similar. Well, almost like if you wanted to go to another country, you get a passport and you make sure it's not expired, and you get all the proper paperwork, and then you can go. Now, not every single Arab living in Gaza or West Bank or whatever it might be has the ability to travel 100% beyond areas A, B, and C in the West Bank, well, depending on which area, or in Gaza. But if you're 25, if you're holding on a steady job, I believe you have to be married. There's a bunch of qualifications. Then you can get a permit and you can work inside Israel. But again, going back to the reason that this partition wall is there in the first place is an unfortunate reality of there are many, many, many people, as we all know, with rising anti-Semitism in America, it is definitely no different in the Middle East, that want to do harm to Jews. Not all of them. And the people who are stuck in the middle in every country, in America with no difference, the people who get stuck in the middle, it's unfortunate. It's sad. It's unfair. And there are gripping stories on all sides, in all countries, that are hard to watch and hard to listen to and are true. And yet, for both sides, safety has to be the number one issue, I believe. Safety has to be. You can't live in safety. It's very hard to live at all. It's very hard to focus on your job when you can't even get through the bus ride to work. Another interesting note about borders and about partition walls and about defense is that Gaza is also borders with Egypt. And Egypt, it's not like an open, everyone can come in. There's a reason that Egypt also has a very, very tight border and defensive system between their border and Gaza as well. For better or for worse. Well, it's really for worse that there's the leadership in Gaza is Hamas. Hamas is an internationally recognized terrorist organization. It's kind of like, imagine if there were terrorists in Congress. That we don't have that. But the people who are leading the country are not like people that you and I know and are friends with. They're people who have pretty bad intentions a lot of the time. I'm not talking about the PA, even though they also have some pretty bad policies about pay to slay, right? Paying terrorists. If you're not familiar with the term pay to slay, please look it up. Terrorists, as an example, one of my students who was killed in a terrorist attack, the terrorist is sitting in jail, doing 4 life sentences right now, and he's getting paid very handsomely. Not by Israel. But there's a reason that there's borders between Egypt as well, because there are a lot of people there that wish to do harm on others. And that's something that if you're trying to live in a safe, secure, economy-driven society, you need to be able to make sure that the people who are coming in and out of your society have the same intentions. And that's not always the case when it comes to certain people, specifically terrorists, for sure. Like in terms of getting in and out of Israel, first of all, in one of the videos, in the pianist from Ramallah, he's clearly flying to Russia. So there is ability to travel, which is in that video. I thought that was interesting. And in the other video, when he's trying 200 meters, when he's trying to get to the hospital, if you needed to get to the hospital, you could get to a hospital. You don't have to smuggle in to get to a hospital. There are hospitals also in Ramallah and in Gaza, etc. I think it's an incredible display of morality that Israel treats, I don't even know, untold numbers of everyone. And the reason I became a medic in the army was because it was right after the eviction of Gush Katif, in which the Israeli government used Israeli soldiers, IDF soldiers, to evict these Jewish people from their homes, which was very sad and a difficult time in our country. And I became a medic because I knew that even if I was in a battle shooting at an enemy, and that if we wounded that enemy, I would go and take that enemy and we would treat him in an Israeli hospital. I knew that at least as a medic, I was helping, I was healing, I was treating. Even if it deals with the complexities of literally shooting at an enemy and then helping that same enemy, at least I knew I was doing something right. That was actually the main reason I became a medic. A lot of people don't know this, that even still till today, there are between 3 and 9 terror attacks that happen in Israel every single day on average. And so this is not something that used to be but is no longer relevant. This is something that is a daily presence. The overwhelming majority of these terror attacks don't get through. The overwhelming majority of the terror attacks that even happen don't even get through to Israeli news. To American news, to American news outlets. We don't hear about them sitting here in America. But there is still a great need for security, for defense. Israel has gone multiple times over the years and is ready at any time to come to a negotiating table to talk about peace. However, Hamas, like I said, is a terrorist organization and is not really interested in peace. When you have Party A is interested in peace and Party B is not interested in peace, you're just not really going to get to peace that way. I think those are some of my main reflections from the video. For the people, I'm just going to reiterate this point, for the people who are stuck in the middle, for the Arabs who are stuck in the middle, for Jews who might work with Arabs who can't get to work on time because there was a problem in security, they're stuck in the middle, right? For the person that they were building the house for, who now the house is delayed because there's a conflict happening, whatever it is, they're stuck in the middle. For people who are stuck in the middle of policies and governments worldwide, it's hard and it stinks and it's a bummer and it's unfair and it causes real damage to real people. But at the end of the day, America, Israel, South Africa, Brazil, Norway, whatever country you're looking at, every country by dint of being a country has the right to live in safety. Citizens and the citizens of others is no different. And I think that is something that we can see that the importance of it in the video, in these two videos. And I hope you enjoyed watching the movie. I hope that some of what I'm saying here is illuminating to you. I'm happy to answer questions. If you can send them over to Riva and she can email them to me and I'll do my best to answer them. And I hope that you look into this on your own. And if you're looking at different websites to understand them, make sure to look at a variety of websites and not just see one picture of a very complex issue. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Akiva, for giving us a very something that is very complex, giving us a nuanced understanding of all the things that go into trying to protect a country and its people and the challenges both of the government and the challenges that individuals face. It's not an easy solution, and we hope that one day it will be much easier because there will be peace and positive relationships between the peoples in the region. If anyone has questions for Akiva, email me and I will be sure to get Akiva to answer and then email you back. My email is rivagambert@gmail.com. Thank you very much, Akiva. Be well and see you at the movies. Lehitraut.